Sam Harris is, I think, considered by most to be one of the world's leading atheists. And ever since I saw a YouTube video of an interview with Sam Harris at a Congregational church in Los Angeles, I have been looking forward to this morning, not knowing that it would actually ever happen. I confess I don't know the manner in which God is involved in these things, but I believe that He is. And of course, our guest this morning will see it differently than I do. But I believe that God brought us together. I was several months ago thinking about and praying about, since I saw that Sam Harris video, I ought to get connected with the atheist community somehow in this area. And I was in Starbucks and I was listening to a video of Sam Harris on my phone, and I didn't have earphones with me on that particular day, which usually I have earphones. And I didn't think the video was all that loud, but Sajan was sitting over there and he was like, "Hey, is that Sam Harris?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he kind of gave me a thumbs up. And so I walked over and talked with him, and here we are. And so I am really, really looking forward to this morning. Before Sajan comes, I want to just tell you what I think are the reasons for this morning, or the purposes for this morning, or what I hope that you will get out of this morning. I think really three things. One, I think this morning gives us the opportunity to learn from Sajan's perspective and to get to know him. I think we have something to learn from each person and each perspective, however different they might be from our own. And so I hope you learn something this morning from Sajan's perspective. Number two, we have, as a collective body this morning, the opportunity to represent the love of God to someone who is unfamiliar with the church. Sajan has never been to church, except for a few months ago, or a couple months ago, when he attended a service here. And so we have the opportunity this morning to represent to him the love of God, to attempt to put ourselves in his shoes, to understand what it's like to be him, and in so doing, represent the love of the God that did the same thing for us in the person of Jesus. And number three, I hope what you will see here this morning is charitable discourse. So much discourse in the world today is not charitable, but is rather kind of an antagonistic focus on that which divides us rather than that which unites us. And certainly we will see some things differently. And this morning is not really a back and forth debate. We're trying to get to know Sajan and to learn from his perspective. But I still hope that what you see here this morning is an example of the way that discourse or dialogue can be done charitably. And hopefully it serves as a platform or a way for us to engage in that moving forward. So what's going to happen is Sajan's going to come here, and he and I are going to go through just a little dialogue, some questions that we have rehearsed and talked about. And then we want to give you the opportunity to ask some questions if you have any questions that you'd like to ask him. I know all of you will do that graciously and kindly, but Sajan is not easily offended, and he would encourage you to ask whatever question you want to ask. And so don't hesitate to do that. Sajan and I have had the opportunity to visit a number of different times. And I admit he is smarter than I am. I wish I was saying that tongue-in-cheek. But we are really in for a treat this morning. So we are glad to welcome Sajan Parikh. Here's how you pronounce his name, okay? And you're drinking gin. Sajan, okay? Parikh. So let's welcome him as he comes. Good night.
Testing. Hello.
Good. Well, thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Good morning.
Yeah, we are. This is going to be great. So to kind of kick things off, just tell us who you are. Tell us who you are and where you're from and where you are now and what you're doing and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so my name is Sajan, Parikh, and I really appreciate the phonetic there. The tonic is not included. I grew up in Iowa, so a very small town, rural Iowa, just very much similar to where I'm at in Wisconsin now. I'm in Grafton. I've been doing work in the IT field for over a decade now. Right now, I am a consultant in the networking space, in the telecommunications space. So everything that moves your data from your phone to Facebook to the world, I've been in wonderful opportunities to touch a lot of the global networking that makes our world work. And I mean, that's kind of the high level stuff here. I've been in Wisconsin for about 4 or 5 years, almost 5 years now, and I don't see myself leaving.
Yeah, no, it's great. We are actually hoping to maybe sometime in March get Sajan back to do a little seminar on the internet and maybe social media a little bit. Who are the people out there that understand how the internet works? I'm not one of them. He is one of them. Okay. So, and loves to talk about it. We talked about that a little bit. So, no, that's great. That's great. Well, we're glad to have you here in Wisconsin and all of that. We've titled this morning rather provocatively, I guess, Interview with an Atheist, right? But I suppose we would confess that we kind of each have our own definition of what that word means, and certainly we each have stereotypes surrounding that word, right? Just like the word Christian would come with certain stereotypes, I suppose the word atheist is the same, right? So just maybe define that word for us, and then is that an accurate description of yourself?
Sure. So I think the word atheist, as you mentioned, even within the atheist community has different meanings and words as well. So it's kind of hard to just put a blanket definition around everybody. I can't even speak for everybody but I do think that there is something of a scope that we can put around that word. And for me, that is a very singular piece of information about me on a very singular defined topic, which is, do I believe in a God? And that is the only question that word should answer for you about me, and the answer for me is no, but it doesn't speak to anything else about me at all. And I think there's a lot of semantics that get thrown around in the world about, okay, well, if you don't believe in God, then this, and this must be true. And even if those things happen to correlate with people like myself and my belief in this one topic, the word itself does not automatically attribute it to me. So I am my own person, but that word is really just speaking to that one fact. So as an atheist, I don't believe in a God or a deity of any kind.
And so maybe for us, it might just be helpful to say, don't ascribe any more meaning to that word other than I don't believe in God. To kind of characterize it or caricature it as that person thus is also this and this and this, you're saying would be going too far. Yeah.
That word just talks about that first piece, the God piece. Everything else, it's all separate.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And tell us kind of how you got to that perspective. I mean, did you grow up in a particular tradition but then began to see things differently, or you've always kind of held this perspective, or just how did that kind of unfold?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everyone has their own kind of journey. I'm an Indian. My parents are from India. They immigrated here. I was born here, so I was, raised here. However, it's interesting, if you're not from a first-generation immigrant family, you kind of may not see the perspective. But inside the household, you're still very much from wherever your parents came from. So inside the household, everything's Indian, everything. My parents trying to hold on to what they grew up with, right, before they moved to the U.S. So growing up, my parents are Jainan. It's kind of a sect of Hinduism. And everything that I did in my life was with that sort of undertone. Everything was Jain, everything from what I ate, the rituals, the day-to-day stuff. So up until maybe I was in middle school or so, you could consider me a very devout Jain. And what kind of shook that just a little bit was in third grade, I went to India for school, for the whole school year. My parents sent me there, and I think they were kind of afraid that, afraid, not with any sort of negative connotations, but you've got to understand if you're an immigrant family, you're kind of seeing your child not grow up the same way you did. So they're like, okay, well, let's go send him to India. He'll kind of learn the culture and be instilled with our values and whatever, that may be. And they sent me to kind of the equivalent of a seminary almost. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was a very religious focused school in India. And I went there on my own. My parents stayed here, so it was kind of a boarding school. And it was probably 60% religion, 30% academics, and I came back being even more devout Jain, So now I'm in the U.S. for another, probably through high school, almost through high school, and still very much a believer and follower of Jainism. And kind of how I arrived here was, in the Jain religion, a lot of the stuff is very ritualistic. And it's not just once in a while or during the holidays. The rituals are daily. There's things that happen daily. Every single day there's something happening that there's some physical action you have to perform, whether it's with food, whether it's with a shrine or a temple or something. And in trying to understand where and why some of these things were happening, my search for answers kind of came up empty in that religion. And rather than me kind of hold on to the beliefs, I kind of flipped it the other way and said, well, let me start here and see if I can find those answers as a non-believer. And that's kind of how I ended up as a non-believer.
Interesting. Well, and that kind of, leads us into, I think people of faith look at kind of the atheistic perspective and say, I mean, we're all trying to make sense out of life, right? We're all wrestling with the same questions. Why were we born, and why are we here, and what happens when we die? We're all trying to make sense out of life, right? And people of faith, we find answers to those questions. We find kind of strength and hope through a belief in God and a belief in something beyond this life, right? Obviously, you wrestle with those questions too, or continue to wrestle with those questions. So just talk about how you kind of make sense out of things and where you find strength and hope in the face of life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extremely human to feel unsettled by a lot of these mysteries. These are very grand sort of things in our life: where we came from, where we go, what is the meaning. All these sort of questions are very, the ultimate questions that we want answered, and not always knowing, especially given some of our struggles day to day, is unsettling to everybody. So absolutely, I think we all struggle with and wrestle with the same stuff. For me, when I first became a non-believer, it was more, I was a very staunch atheist, is the best way I can put it, and where it kind of shifted from Jainism being the undertone of my entire life, atheism became a very forefront overtone of my life. And that was simply in search of these exact answers. And then my mom ended up being diagnosed with cancer at a very young age for me. She was 46, and she was still very, theological, and we would have amazing conversations, during that phase of my life, where we would go back and forth, and it was somewhat combative. However, on her deathbed, she was still, holding on to these things for comfort. And that's when I kind of realized that the non-believing part or her believing part shouldn't be the under or overtone of either our lives. And that discourse that I had, if it gave her comfort, it gave her comfort. And ultimately, I realized in that moment that these questions, for some people, this is a way of kind of wrapping your head around things and articulating what I think we all might share. It's just that I think theological societies have put words to these things, whereas I haven't. And in terms of how I make peace with that, honestly, I don't. And I think it's just, rather than make peace, it's just something that I accept that I don't know the answer to. And I think in the religious community, I don't mean to speak for everybody, of course, obviously here, but I think ultimately we're all kind of in the same boat, and I've just chosen not to articulate exactly what I feel, whereas a lot of the religions out in the world kind of try to articulate those feelings of unsettledness and uncomfortableness on those subjects.
Yeah. So just as a follow-up, I mean, we would answer those questions in particular ways, right? And in the Christian tradition, kind of in the person and story of Jesus, and we find strength and hope there. Where do you kind of find strength and hope, I guess, or where's kind of motivation or all of that in life where you're saying, hey, I'm just holding these with, I don't know the answer to these questions, right? And so I'm just going to leave it there. Where do you find kind of strength and hope?
Yeah, if I understand correctly, the question is more if I don't know those questions, what's the point of kind of my day-to-day and kind of why do I keep going? And for me, and this I think is a personal thing to everybody. This has nothing to do with, I think, atheism or any group of people. For me, it's the people around me. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to affect other people, and to the degree that I keep affecting other people and other people rely on me or in my community, or even if I don't, my strive for affecting the world around me, I think that's really all it comes down to. And it's a very materialistic answer because it really is, what is my mark on the people around me and the world around me today? But that's really what I aim to do on a day-to-day basis, and it kind of removes, for me, the holes that the uncertainness and the uncomfortableness of those other questions kind of leave.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that also kind of leads us into, I think the first time that you and I talked, right, one of the things you said was, hey, I mean, 80% of what you say I'm on board with, right? I just don't add the divine element. You know what I mean? And so that is, spirituality is important, or spiritual practices are important, right? Or the church and community and connection with others and all of that, So just talk about kind of spirituality and what you think it offers. And I mean, are there spiritual practices that you participate in?
Absolutely. So, I mean, first, the definition of the word spirituality, as I'm sure you know, can be muddy, but given what I assume we're all talking about here, I think ultimately it's being in touch with your emotions and the people and the emotions of those around you. And that's love, connectedness, friendship, community, everything that you mentioned. These are all things that we need. We could all, the monetary system could all go away tomorrow, and we would still be happy and content if these other things kind of upheld themselves. For me, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Christmas is a holiday during the year. It's something I participate in every year. I may not believe the story or why it came through, but I mean, who doesn't love jingle bells and carols and presents? These are all just things that we all enjoy. So it's something I absolutely participate in. Now, some of that is the function of just the society that I live in. If I lived in a country that did not celebrate Christmas around me, I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't be the only person wearing a Santa outfit in the middle of, wherever. But, not that I do that here either, but Christmas is one, and honestly, I enjoy almost every sort of, ritual or holiday or observance for what it offers, and this is not to be, combative, but for its face value, because I think there is something very, very material and tangible about the joy and cheerfulness and Christmas is just a great example, that particular holiday offers in otherwise what is a very gloomy, snowy, dark, cold time of year. And these are things that, it's easy to look past the religious part for me because I don't need to, If I want to give out gifts to people, I don't need to, so that's fine. Yeah. No, it's good. Maybe this is kind of going back to something you said earlier, but we've talked about this idea of mystery, right? That we're all living under this blanket of mystery as we try to make sense of the world. And maybe a valid critique of people of faith is that sometimes we talk about our beliefs as though they're a matter of certainty rather than a matter of faith, right? I mean, all of us are exercising faith under this blanket of mystery, right? Things that we don't understand or whatever. So just talk about that. I mean, the role that faith plays maybe in your life, or just as you deal with this blanket of mystery that we all live under. Sure. So there's obviously things that we don't know that, is very easy to kind of identify. And I feel that the religious community might be very, very segmented and fragmented on this. I think some people very much are, like you said, this is what happened, this is the way things are, and there is kind of no two ways about it. And for me, it's hard to have this conversation that we're having today with, or conversation that I've had with Jeff in the past when that's the case. And for me, there are things that you kind of have to hold true in order to get through life, right? And whether you know them to be fact or whether you've kind of gone through the scientific, quote unquote, way of getting down to this is what's true, even if you haven't done that and it's still a mystery, it is okay to hold some belief on that topic because it's something that you need to have as actionable as part of your day-to-day life. I may not know, for example, what Paris is like because I haven't been there. And if I just believe what everybody told me, then I could be in the same boat as religion, just believe what everybody told me. But we still have some idea, even if we haven't been to Paris, we still have some idea of what we think it is, and we use that thought as actionable. So to a certain degree, I'm okay with people holding beliefs. I certainly do on things that I don't have the actual answer to, as long as we identify that and call it faith, right? And for me, if things change, if I get new information, I'll kind of adjust that, accordingly. But ultimately, as long as it's called faith and we kind of agree that there's no certainty on almost anything that we hold on some of these topics, I don't have a problem with almost any belief.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. We talked about this question and whether or not we were going to throw it in there. I want to throw it in there. So this is one we said, right, we've not, or I don't know your answer to this question, okay? So we kind of haven't, but it's something I would like to know, right? I've watched a lot of Christopher Hitchens, as you know, we've talked about him. Christopher Hitchens was another leading atheist in the world. He passed away in 2011, I think, got cancer. A brilliant guy, and very, very articulate and would push, buttons at different debates that he did. Or whatever.
This would go a very different way if he were here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. One interview that Sam Harris did, Christopher Hitchens was a part of, and a couple other guys or whatever, and Sam was like, I was thinking about this and just thinking, I don't know if this is going to be good or what. My wife was like, Sam, anything that Hitchens does is not boring, So I think that Christopher Hitchens was a unique guy. But it seemed like any debate that he was in, he always got around to saying like, hey, religion is this divine dictator that says, hey, if you do it my way, then you're good, and if you don't do it my way, well, then I'm going to punish you for forever, kind of thing. I mean, this was his kind of caricature of religion. And I always wanted to say to Christopher Hitchens, hey, I don't see it that way. To me, divinity is this parental figure, right, who encourages us in the best way to go, and whose love is for all of us. Whether or not we get it right, whether or not we believe it right, it doesn't matter. That God's love is for all of us, and that we hope in that God is ultimately going to reconcile everybody to Himself, right, and going to bring about justice and redemption and restoration and all of these things, So I don't see this divine dictator that you're in and you're out kind of thing. This would probably be another valid critique of religion, is this creation of in-groups and out-groups, you're in, you're out kind of thing. You're going to heaven, you're not going to heaven kind of thing, But if we take that away and say that God's love is everlasting, for all of us, I wonder if that for Christopher Hitchens, or if that for you kind of softens the critique of religion a little bit. Does that make a difference?
Well, for one, if your beliefs are to be true, you will get the chance to ask Hitchens at some point.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Yeah. You won't. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'll answer in lieu. It does soften it, because I think for most people that have a negative view of religion, it is that it's the in groups, the out groups, and sort of the sort of tangible societal pieces that kind of get exuded from religion. And if you remove those to a certain degree, I think you'd find that most people have no problem with religion at all, no matter what the beliefs are, even between faiths, you know. And for me, the idea that I can be a part of this community and be a part of things like this is absolutely phenomenal. But at the end of the day, it doesn't quite matter what, for non-believers, from my perspective, it doesn't matter what you believe, whether you believe it's the in-group, out-group, or God's all-loving kind of in general without barriers. For me, I can only judge things based on my experiences with the religious people individually. Because as a non-believer, I don't see past why they're loving me, why they're being kind to me. I don't see the beyond. I just see whether they're loving me or kind to me or not. And at the end of the day, if everybody kind of just is a little more positive as a whole, you know, the entire community becomes a little more, and excuse my word here, but palatable for the non-believers out there. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sure. Here's another one that we have talked about, but I wanted to throw in here too. I'm not just putting you on the spot, but I asked you once, I said, it seems like that non-believing people will kind of look at the community of faith and say, we just explain everything by saying God, right? Well, God did it, or whatever. This is kind of our default. You know what I mean? And maybe the people of faith would look at the atheistic community and say, your default is just coincidence, right? Well, we're not going to credit that to God, so it's just coincidence that happened. Whatever it is, whether we, say this was an answer to prayer or whatever, I think people of faith would say, well, atheists would say, well, that was just coincidence. But as you and I talked about it, it's certainly more nuanced than that. You wouldn't just say, well, no, it's just coincidence. Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to my comment earlier about you have to hold something to get through the day, right, on any particular topic or event that you see. You have to hold something to believe in order to make a decision on how to move forward in life. And coincidence is just one of those things. I think a lot of times we say, scientists, or I shouldn't say scientists either, but non-believers will say coincidence until something else has been kind of discovered. And I will certainly say that, yes, this Jeff and I meeting, nobody had a hand in it, and Jeff would say that God had a hand in it. And tomorrow we might find out that there was some guy who randomly just knew both of us and twisted some dials to get us together. But if that were to come up to be true, we would both be wrong. We'd both change our beliefs. I would. Well, you would probably still say there's some God undertone, even beyond that. Sure. But I think both sides have actually exercised something very similar over the course of history. I think the church has obviously morphed and evolved while still retaining its core beliefs, and that's great. And I think the non-believing world is by default always morphing. If we don't know something, we start with we don't know, and we say it's coincidence just so that we can get through the day. But at the end of the day, we don't know, right? And until there's more information, we either will never know or we might find something new. And I think it's really ultimately the idea of, can you at the end of the day accept not knowing, right? And I think that's the kind of internal struggle that a lot of people have. Can you just leave it at I don't know?
Yeah, no. Where you'd say it's not just coincidence. We say I use the information that I have in front of me, right, to explain things, and otherwise say I don't know. And as we talked about one time, 100 years from now, maybe we'll say, well, we'll understand better how the brain works and whatever, and we'll be able to offer an explanation for some of these things that we don't. And you're right. I mean, as we have talked about that will not take away from me the idea that I believe God is, part of all that. So, anyways, yeah, interesting. You, again, are kind of unfamiliar with the church, right? But visited here a few months ago and sat through a service, and that was great. So I know we kind of talked about that or debriefed afterwards or whatever, but just talk about your experience being here a couple months ago.
Yeah, and I mean, first of all, and I'm just absolutely grateful to all of the warm welcomes. I mean, there's when you're an adult, I mean, when you're outside of school, there's very few places that you can walk into a group of strangers and everybody happens to say hello and wishes you a good morning. So I think the idea of coming to church, whether, whatever the substance is or how I perceive it versus everybody else, there is something very intoxicating and very positive about being here. And I think it's everything combined. It's everything from the wonderful music as you kind of walk in, the somber kind of tone lets you kind of come at peace. And even if I'm in the back row listening or not, it's a place of forced mindfulness, which you kind of on your own have to practice and really understand how to do. But when you're here, there's just something about, no one told me, there's no rules here, but I told you, there's just something understood about this room, I should turn my phone off, for example, right? And I don't know why that it was innate in my behavior coming in here, but I turned my phone off, and it allowed my brain to kind of wander. And again, it's forced mindfulness, and I think there's so many Sunday mornings where I kind of enjoy the fact that I've got my work done, I can relax today, and I end up being lazy. And this Sunday, and the Sunday that I visited that time, there's just something very rejuvenating and intoxicating, I think is one of the best words I can say. It's just positive. So regardless of belief, regardless of how I perceive things, both times, including today, have yielded a net positive start to my day. Absolutely.
Oh, good. Well, we're glad about that. So how can we, as a community of faith, right, better help to bridge the gap between different perspectives, right? Or, hopefully this morning is part of that, obviously, but how else can we be a part of being a help to the non-believing community?
Short of you blasting Sam Harris at Starbucks every week?
Yeah.
No, I think this is tough, right? Because at the core of it, the reason why we're here today are certain beliefs, and I think as long as those are differs, it's going to be a little difficult. But I think one thing that I've personally, and I can't say this will work at a broader scale, but something personally that I've always wanted to do is volunteer and be a part of things that predominantly are led by church groups. And you just don't see other groups of people come together, other communities, in a way to move towards a certain goal the way that churches are able to. And why that is a different conversation. But it would be very nice to maybe market those things, for lack of a better terms, in a way that is somewhat separate from the theology of the church and somewhat aside from the church itself. And it's completely fine for a church to have its fingers in things and kind of influence these activities and actions and movements. But if the fact that it's a church group executing a particular goal was slightly softened, it would include other people to kind of join and do things. And ultimately, I think that would just expand the network of people, because I think you will agree when I say that your congregation here is not solely defined by who shows up in this building on Sundays.
Sure.
Right? And anything you can do to kind of expand who we talk to week, who we interact with, I think would help bridge that gap, because it's just more people connecting at that point.
Yeah. No, that's great. And this OCC has been a really positive place for me, and I know one of the things that you said in our conversations is that you were a little nervous coming to church that first time, right? And kind of your perception is, hey, I'm going to go to church and somebody there is going to try and convert me, right? And I think this OCC has done such a great job of being this place where, hey, we have this freedom of individual conscience. We believe in diversity and respect and theological humility, right? And I think that's been a great thing, and hopefully that's something where people come and they don't feel like I've got to believe it a certain way, So
no, in fact, I'll just make a comment. I won't point out the individual, but I was here first, sitting in the back row, and somebody else walked in, and it was very interesting to hear. Just somebody said something to the effect of, "This will be interesting today," and I'll be very honest, very candid. My immediate reaction was, oh boy, they don't know it's me sitting here and something is going to be said just now. And in fact, the very next words were, we could all learn something. And I think that kind of immediately cut the ice or broke the ice for me. And it's something that I'm very grateful for everybody in this room, especially because I know it's not true of most churches, actually, regardless of faith.
Yeah.
So absolutely, this has been great.
Yeah, good. Great folks up here, that's for sure. Well, anybody that you guys want to ask a question, I'm going to pass the mic, or Stacy can pass the mic after. You could just yell it out, but for the purpose of the recording, it's nice to have it on the mic. So, yeah.
Sajan, thanks very much for being with us today. And my question is, when something terrible or scary happens, so I'm thinking, one of our kids gets really sick, or someone we love is in terrible trouble, our immediate response might be to pray, and to pray hard. And I just wanted to ask, when that kind of thing happens in your life, what do you do?
It might surprise you to say that I also want to pray, right? Because ultimately it's a matter of going through the emotions of whatever the situation is. And for me, it's an acceptance of there are things that I can control and things that I cannot. And sadness, grief, sorrow, all of these things I have accepted as normal pieces of me, and some of these things just can't be cured because I am human. And for those that seek a cure, prayer may be a way to kind of ease that mental stress, or believe that, by performing this prayer, I'm increasing my chances of something happening or just comforting myself. But I have accepted that I will just allow myself to go through the grief, the sorrow, the pain, and come out a stronger human being. And that's how I've approached kind of all of the hardships that I've had in life. And I look at some of my successes today and situations that I'm able to handle today, and I'm able to sometimes pinpoint that I've gone through X, Y, and Z 10 years ago, and that was hard. And me having gone through that is the reason why I'm strong today on that.
Anybody else?
Sajan, thank you for being here again. I'm curious, a lot of people come to church for the sense of community and belonging and being with other people that believe some of the things or maybe all things they believe in. And I'm curious, I know there's no Church of the Atheist, I guess, but do you find yourself wanting to make community, or do you find yourself being part of an atheist community? Do you go to Starbucks in hopes of overhearing someone listening to something that you could connect with? But as community, do you have that? Is that something that's important to you? Is there an atheist community, I guess, that you're connected to?
That's a great question. So I do hope to go to Starbucks and overhear things, but that's mainly because I'm single. So that's a whole different conversation. But there are atheist communities out there. There's a lot of meetups and free thought communities and things of that nature. I personally kind of avoid that, because if you think about the word atheist, going back to the original question in the beginning, it's really just, I don't believe in God, right? And there just happens to be a word for this antithesis, right? There just happens to be a word for it. If we went out and make communities for every single thing that falls into that category, would we have a community of everyone who's not an astronaut? Would we have a community of everybody who's not a carpenter? And I just don't think it's healthy to have a community that is brought together solely by what they're against or what they don't believe in. But that, of course, leaves the fact that, yes, I would love to be part of communities. I would love to be part of social networks. I think that is a very human need to feel connected. And we observe this in, not to get too long-winded, but dogs are pack animals. There's a reason why they get so sad when, they're left in the home alone. And they get so happy when you come back, is because they just don't understand why, because it's just hardwired for them to be around people or be around others like them, and I am as well. But how we find that in the non-believing community is a little bit different. It's not as cookie cutter as a lot of believers have it sometimes. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you for being here this morning. I have thoroughly enjoyed the dialogue. I have just one question which you may have already addressed, but I have a hard time hearing, and so I'm not sure of it. But anyway, we Christians believe in an afterlife. It sometimes takes on different descriptions, but it's usually a place where there's no more crying or pain or death or dying, because all the former things have passed away and everything is being made new. Do you have a concept of afterlife that supports you?
The short answer is I do not. And this goes back to the first question. When my mother passed away, there's certainly a level of comfort of thinking that she will be in a place as you just described. For me personally, everything that I know today, that I can say that this is what I know, does not involve that, unfortunately. And it's something that it has taken me a long time to make peace with. And I certainly don't expect everybody to kind of arrive at what I arrived. But my day-to-day life is, in my opinion, more around who I am around today in this world, my actions today. And for me, thinking that there is no afterlife allows me to kind of focus on this and make sure that I really make my mark here. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for helping me with my level of acceptance today, because I spent most of my life being raised in an either-or mentality, and this contributes today to understanding that both and can exist in the same place at the same time, and no explosions happen, and nothing falls down. And
I didn't burst into flames walking in here.
There you go. My question for you is that, unless I'm wrong, from what I heard you say earlier, based on the legacy your parents gave you, based upon their belief, because Wikipedia is a wonderful thing, and I looked it up quickly, and the values that they carried in their upbringing are nonviolence, truth, not stealing, chastity, and non-possessions. Those are the major influences of that. What legacy of values do you hope to leave the world?
I'm not sure I have enough time to unpack that, because that's very deep. But, ultimately I think this speaks to, Jeff made a comment and reiterates something that I mentioned to him a while ago, which is I do agree with 80%, it's not a hard number, of all religions. And I think there's something good to be taken from everything. And for me, the only value and legacy that I can succinctly say that I would like to leave is anybody that I've had an impact with or interacted with, I hope that they are a better person for it. That is all that I can hope for in every interaction. And that is not influenced for me by any theology, although it is fair to say with your Wikipedia that absolutely, that actually probably was instilled in me by my parents' practice of Jainism. But I have shed a lot of the pieces that, kind of put it in a box of Jainism. I don't think Jainism has, complete ownership of those particular values. So my goal would be to kind of take what I can from Jainism, from Christianity, from anything else that I've learned, and kind of spread the positivity and pleasure in other people's lives.
Maybe we got one time for one more, maybe.
Thank you again for being here. We have friends that are atheists. They're also very smart. I'm curious if a part of it is just being more comfortable with facts versus not having the facts. Is that part of it?
I think so. And as Jeff mentioned, it's very, very hard to offend me, so please, I'm as respectful as I possibly can, but if I say something, it's with no ill intent. For me, I think you're absolutely correct. I think there's a level of search for the answer to those ultimate questions that I don't think non-believers will ever accept, even if the answer hit them in the face. And I think that kind of instills just this constant search, because we will always accept that there is a better answer out there. And I think from my perspective, theists and believers kind of take an answer that's given, and they're able to let that be the positivity in their life and that portion of their search there, and that's completely fine. It doesn't consume them the way it does some scientists.
Well, thank you. So this has been great. This has been a lot of fun, really good for us, I think, and I positive for you, and so thank you so much for doing it. We typically end with kind of a benediction, right? Usually some sort of scripture or something, and what we, I guess, hope for you is maybe can be summed up in the words of the Irish blessing, which is not come from the scripture, but maybe would be appropriate for you. So let's stand together, and is this on here? Yes, good. Let's read this together. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be ever at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.